researchers' bombshell new findings about a strange rock formation in Turkey could prove that Noah's Ark is real. So they can actually map out the shape of what they think is the boat, which means they can measure the size of the boat.
The mountains of eastern Turkey hide something that has confused researchers for more than 60 years. Buried near the Durupınar site is a massive ship-shaped formation so large that some investigators believe it could match the dimensions described in the biblical story of Noah's Ark. But this mystery just took a dramatic turn. New scans using ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis reportedly uncovered strange, right-angled structures deep underground. So what are researchers really looking at here? Is this one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever found, or just nature playing tricks on human imagination? And if this is only rock, then why does it seem to look engineered? What's hiding in the dirt isn't just rock, but a massive scientific and geopolitical controversy that began back in 1959. The 60-year illusion, the Durupınar discovery. What's hiding in the dirt isn't just rock, but a massive geopolitical and scientific controversy that started in 1959. Before we can understand the shocking radar scans and underground claims making headlines today, we need to go back to the exact moment this mystery first exploded into the public eye. Because the story of the Durupınar site did not begin with archaeologists, viral TikToks, or YouTube treasure hunters. It started with a Turkish army captain flying over one of the most isolated mountain regions on Earth. High in eastern Turkey, near Mount Ararat, Captain İlhan Durupınar was helping map the rugged terrain after heavy rains and earthquakes had exposed unusual formations in the ground. Then something caught the attention in the air. Resting on the mountainside was a giant shape that did not look random at all. It looked uncannily like the outline of a ship buried in the earth. And this was not some tiny hill that people were exaggerating with blurry photographs. The formation measured roughly 538 feet long. That number instantly sent shockwaves through biblical archaeology circles because, according to the book of Genesis, Noah's Ark was described as 300 royal Egyptian cubits long. When researchers converted those ancient measurements into modern feet, the dimensions lined up almost perfectly with the Durupınar formation. That was the moment this stopped being just a weird mountain. It became a global obsession. Imagine being one of the first people to see this shape from above in the 1950s. A perfectly boat-shaped outline sitting near the mountains connected to Noah's Ark traditions for centuries. Wouldn't your brain immediately start connecting dots? Wouldn't you at least wonder if ancient history accidentally left a fingerprint in the dirt? During the 1970s and 1980s, the site became a magnet for explorers, biblical researchers, documentary crews, and relic hunters. Some investigators claimed they found symmetrical patterns beneath the surface. Others believed they identified petrified wooden beams, anchor stones, or man-made structures. Photos of the site are spread everywhere. Books were written. Tours were organized. For many believers, this was not just archaeology anymore. This was physical proof that one of humanity's oldest stories actually happened. But this is where the story takes a hard turn. Mainstream geologists began studying the formation more carefully, and their conclusions were far less dramatic. By the 1990s, several peer-reviewed geological studies argued that the Durupınar site was completely natural. Researchers described it as a doubly plunging syncline, basically a rock formation created by layers of sediment bending over time through pressure, mudflows, and erosion. In simple terms, nature had accidentally sculpted a shape that looked strikingly artificial. That explanation hit like a bucket of ice water. By 1996, many scientists considered the case closed. To them, the mystery was solved. No ancient ship, no preserved ark, just geology playing visual tricks on human imagination. And honestly, this raises a pretty uncomfortable question. Are human beings naturally programmed to see meaning where none exists? We see faces in clouds, animals in shadows, and maybe even giant boats in mountains. So is the Durupınar formation evidence of Noah's Ark, or evidence of how badly humans want mysteries to be real? For years, the scientific world moved on. Interest cooled down. Skeptics declared victory. But hidden underneath all that dismissal was one stubborn problem nobody could fully erase. The shape was still there. The dimensions still matched. And every few years, new claims kept dragging the site back into public discussion like a ghost refusing to stay buried. So if geologists supposedly settled this mystery back in the 90s, then why did an international research team return to this exact mountain in 2026, carrying ground-penetrating radar, advanced scanning equipment, and forensic testing tools worth millions of dollars? The 2026 radar breakthrough. They dragged that equipment up there because technology finally caught up with the legend. The surface might look like a natural rock fold to geologists, but according to the latest scans, the underground tells a very different story. For decades, the Durupınar site sat in this strange scientific limbo. Skeptics dismissed it, believers defended it, and most people outside the archaeology world forgot it even existed. But behind the scenes, a new group of American and Turkish researchers quietly started building something much bigger than another amateur expedition. They launched a project focused on one idea: stop arguing about the shape on the surface and scan what's underneath it. That decision completely changed the conversation. The team brought in advanced 3D ground-penetrating radar technology, also called GPR. And despite the complicated name, the idea behind it is surprisingly simple. Imagine standing in front of a dark wall and yelling. If the wall is solid, the echo comes back one way. But if there's a hallway, an empty room, or something hidden behind it, the echo changes. Ground-penetrating radar works almost the same way. It sends electromagnetic pulses into the earth, and those signals bounce back differently depending on what is buried underground. Normally, in natural rock formations, those radar returns look chaotic. You see messy fractures, random curves, uneven sediment, and broken geological layers. Nature is usually disorderly underground. Mountains do not normally organize themselves into neat architectural patterns, but according to the scans released by the Noah's Ark research team, that is not what appeared beneath the Durupınar site. The radar reportedly revealed long, linear shapes, hard angles, and what researchers described as geometric voids nearly 20 feet below the surface. One of the biggest discoveries was an alleged central corridor stretching around 234 feet through the middle of the formation. Instead of random geological noise, the scans appeared to show organized patterns running parallel to each other. And this is where things start getting uncomfortable for both sides of the debate. Because if the formation is entirely natural, why are there straight lines underground? Why do some sections appear compartmentalized? Why do certain radar reflections resemble room-like cavities instead of broken sediment layers? Researchers involved in the project argued that these were not the kinds of shapes they expected from a simple mudflow formation. Some even compared the patterns to structural layouts. Not proof of a ship, not confirmed architecture, but definitely unusual enough to trigger another wave of global attention around the Noah's Ark discovery story. This is the exact moment the internet exploded all over again. Clips of the scans started circulating online. Biblical archaeology forums lit up overnight. Some people called it the greatest hidden archaeological discovery of the century. Others accused the team of interpreting ordinary geological patterns through a religious lens. And honestly, both sides had arguments that sounded believable. Because here's the weird part. Human beings are incredibly good at forcing meaning onto incomplete information. We can stare at blurry radar images and suddenly convince ourselves we're looking at hallways, decks, or giant ancient structures. That happens all the time in archaeology and even in UFO investigations. But at the same time, radar technology has uncovered real buried cities, tombs, tunnels, and ancient ruins before. This is not fantasy equipment. It is real science used in real excavations around the world. So imagine standing there, looking at the radar data yourself. If you saw long straight lines cutting through the middle of a mountain, how would you explain it? Would you assume it was a buried structure, or would you still trust the geological explanation from the 1990s? And then there's another question that keeps pulling researchers back into this mystery, like gravity. Could nature really twist mud and sediment into geometric grids and corridor-like formations with this level of symmetry? Maybe it can. Geologists would say yes, but even some skeptics admit the scans are strange enough to deserve another look. Yet the radar images alone are not the biggest twist in this story, not even close. Because according to the researchers, the real shock came later when they stopped studying the shapes and started studying the dirt itself. And what they claim to have found under the microscope may be the closest thing yet to an actual physical fingerprint of something enormous buried there long ago. Want to know what a dissolved ancient ship might leave behind after thousands of years underground? The chemical ghost, a forensic mystery. A dissolved ship, it turns out, leaves a chemical ghost. And according to recent investigations at the Durupınar site, that ghost may already be hiding in the dirt. This is where the mystery suddenly gets harder to ignore. Up to this point, most arguments focused on appearance, the boat-shaped outline. The radar corridors are underground. The strange geometric patterns are buried beneath the surface. But shapes can deceive people. Humans naturally see meaning in random things. Clouds become monsters. Shadows become faces. Hills become ships. So researchers shifted the question completely. Instead of asking what the formation looks like, they asked something far more scientific. If a massive wooden vessel had actually rested here thousands of years ago, what traces would it leave behind today? Because realistically, nobody expects a perfectly preserved ark sitting underground. Wood exposed to earthquakes, freezing temperatures, moisture, bacteria, and chemical decay for thousands of years would collapse long before modern researchers arrived. It would rot away completely. But even after organic material disappears, it can still leave chemical fingerprints in the soil. That idea changed everything. Researchers connected to the Noah's Ark Scans project reportedly approached the site almost like a forensic investigation instead of a traditional excavation. Rather than searching for giant wooden beams, they analyzed soil chemistry, mineral content, organic traces, and microscopic changes invisible to the human eye. According to published reports, the team collected 88 soil samples from inside and outside the formation. What they found immediately raised eyebrows. The soil inside the outlined shape allegedly contained nearly 3 times more organic matter than the surrounding ground. Researchers also reported elevated potassium levels and noticeably different pH readings compared to nearby control areas. And suddenly, the story stopped sounding like a simple internet legend. Organic matter usually increases when biological material breaks down over long periods. Wood, plants, animal remains, and microorganisms slowly alter the chemistry of the surrounding Earth. Researchers began calling this anomaly a chemical ghost. Not the Ark itself, but the environmental footprint left behind by something massive decomposing underground. Imagine arriving at a crime scene where the body is gone, but the stain remains permanently burned into the floor. That is essentially the argument being made here. Believers quickly connected the dots. They argued that a huge wooden vessel filled with animals and organic material could absolutely leave unusual soil chemistry after thousands of years. Even more intriguing, researchers claim the chemical differences appear mostly inside the boat-shaped outline rather than randomly across the mountain. But skeptics immediately pushed back. Geologists argue that strange soil does not automatically mean an ancient shipwreck. Natural formations can trap water differently, collect organic runoff, and create unusual mineral concentrations over time without any human construction involved. And honestly, that is what makes this mystery so compelling. Both sides sound reasonable. The radar scans are strange. The soil chemistry is strange. The dimensions are strange. But none of it proves this is Noah's Ark. Not yet. And that leaves one massive question hanging over the mountain like a storm cloud. Is Durupınar hiding the remains of an ancient vessel, or is nature performing the greatest geological illusion ever discovered? The skeptics' standoff: natural geology versus relic hunters. To find out who is right, we have to understand how mountains trick us, and the Durupınar Formation is a master illusionist. From above, it whispers one story, but under scientific scrutiny, it tells another. This is exactly where the tension sharpens, because what looks like a man-made outline from the sky can still be nothing more than Earth folding itself in slow motion, like a giant breathing under centuries of pressure. And here is where things get uncomfortable for the Ark theory. Traditional geologists point to something called a doubly plunging syncline, a natural structure where layers of rock bend downward in a long oval shape. Over millions of years, pressure from shifting tectonic plates slowly squeezes sedimentary layers until they form a bowl-like depression. From a distance, especially from the air, that bowl can start to resemble something structured, something intentional, something designed. But in reality, it is geology doing what geology has always done: folding, bending, and reshaping the Earth without any blueprint at all. Now, this is where the explanation gets even more grounded. That syncline acts like a natural basin. When rainwater flows in, it does not just wash through and leave. It collects, stagnates, and begins to carry organic material into the depression. Leaves, plant matter, decaying organisms, all of it gets trapped and slowly breaks down over time. That process changes the chemistry of the soil in a very measurable way, raising organic content, shifting pH levels, and concentrating minerals like potassium in ways that can look unusual when compared to the surrounding terrain. And that is exactly where skeptics push back against the dramatic interpretation of the chemical ghost. They argue there is no need to imagine a massive wooden vessel dissolving into the ground. Instead, what you are seeing is a long-term accumulation system, a natural trap for organic decay that has been quietly building its signature for thousands of years. No ship required, just time, gravity, and water doing what they always do. But here is where the debate really gets interesting. Researchers aligned with the Noah's Ark Scans project still argue that the patterns they are seeing are not random. They point out that when 88 soil samples were taken across and outside the formation, the internal readings consistently showed differences that were not minor. We are talking about nearly 3 times higher organic content in some zones, alongside noticeable chemical shifts that seem to follow the outline of the structure itself. To them, that is not just background noise. That is a footprint. So now, the question splits into 2 completely different worldviews. One side says, this is textbook geology, a predictable outcome of a syncline that has been working for millions of years. The other side looks at the same data and sees something far more structured, almost like something once occupied this space and left a long-lasting imprint beneath the surface. And here is the real tension nobody can ignore. If you were looking at a radar map and saw straight lines emerging inside a mountain, how would you personally explain that? Would you trust the long-established geological model? Or would you start wondering if something man-made could have been buried deep in time? And even more unsettling, could nature really create something that looks this organized just by coincidence? Or are we being fooled by a landscape that is better at pattern making than we are at pattern reading? This is why the Durupınar Formation has become such a scientific standoff. On one side, forensic-style radar interpretation is trying to map what looks like a structure beneath the surface. On the other hand, academic geology is reminding everyone that Earth has been shaping illusions like this for millions of years, long before humans ever showed up to interpret them. So who is right in this standoff? That is the question that keeps this entire debate alive. Because both explanations can technically fit the data, but they lead to completely different conclusions about what this place actually is and what it was never meant to be. And just when it feels like the argument cannot get any sharper, one final question begins to emerge among researchers: the one that might finally settle everything if it ever gets answered properly. What exactly is the final piece of the puzzle that could prove whether this is just a geological illusion or something history has been hiding in plain sight? What researchers are actually questioning? The final piece of the puzzle isn't a piece of wood at all. It's permission. Because after all the radar grids, soil chemistry, and decades of debate, researchers aren't arguing about what they see anymore. They're arguing about what they're allowed to prove. At the Durupınar Formation in eastern Turkey, the data have hit a strange kind of silence. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped long, rigid-looking structures beneath the surface. Soil samples show unusual chemistry with elevated potassium, higher organic content, and shifting acidity levels across the formation. On paper, it looks loud. In reality, it's still not enough. Here's where things get sharp. Scientists are now openly questioning whether these anomalies are actually the footprint of a massive ancient wooden structure or just a rare geological setup that happens to imitate one almost perfectly. Because here's the counterweight. Traditional geologists point to something called a doubly plunging syncline, a natural formation where rock layers bend downward in both directions, forming a long, bowl-like shape. Over thousands of years, that bowl can collect water, sediment, and decaying plant matter, quietly building up exactly the kind of chemical signature that researchers are calling anomalous. So the question becomes almost uncomfortable. Are we looking at the chemical remains of something built or just something buried? And this is where the story stops being about discovery and starts becoming about limits. The surface scans have reached their resolution ceiling. The soil tests can only describe what is there, not what created it. Even the most advanced radar cannot confirm material origin beyond shadow patterns and density shifts. That is why attention has shifted to one final method: core drilling. A controlled excavation would pull actual material from deep inside the formation, layer by layer, giving direct physical evidence of what lies beneath. But that step is not scientific alone. It is political. It requires strict approval from Turkish authorities, environmental review boards, and cultural heritage oversight. And so far, permission remains ungranted. So here's the standoff in its purest form. Do you trust the forensic teams reading the ground like a crime scene? Or the geologists who say nature is simply playing a very convincing illusion? If you were standing there, looking at that formation, what would you believe first? The pattern or the process? And if that permit is finally approved and drilling begins into the center of the formation, what exactly do you think comes up? Ancient timber or ordinary stone, wearing an extraordinary shape? Because right now, everything hangs on that single, unanswered decision. And whatever lies 20 feet below the surface might finally end the argument, or make it even louder. So what is really buried beneath Durupınar? Is it a brilliant geological illusion, or the remains of a lost ancient vessel hidden beneath Turkish soil? The mystery is still alive. Share your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Noah's Ark discoveries, hidden history, and archaeological mysteries, hit like and subscribe for more investigations.